Do make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The sting of her hand still burned across my face when the spit hit me. Hot. Humiliating. My mother-in-law's slap had come first, sharp and cruel, echoing through the dining hall like a gavel announcing judgment. And then my sister-in-law leaned forward, eyes gleaming with hatred, and spat directly at me. The laughter that followed wasn't human, it was a pack of jackals circling prey. They laughed as if breaking me was a game, as if reminding me of my place gave them oxygen. But even as my chest heaved and shame clawed at my throat, I sat there, silent. Not because I was weak, no. But because I knew something they didn't. And just when their laughter rose to its peak, the door opened. The room froze. Their faces drained of color. And the moment their eyes widened in horror, I realized, their worst nightmare had arrived. I should have cried. I should have broken. That was the reaction they wanted. But instead, I held their gaze. My cheek red, my pride intact, my silence cutting deeper than any scream. "You don't belong here," my mother-in-law hissed, her diamond ring catching the light as she pointed at me. "My son made a mistake marrying trash like you. And now that is gone, you are nothing. Nothing." My sister-in-law smirked, leaning back in her chair with arrogance. "Not even worth the dirt under our shoes. You should crawl back to wherever you came from." Her words stabbed, but I didn't flinch. If only they knew, if only they had any idea, what was about to come crashing down on them. The air shifted. A slow creak split through the suffocating silence. The heavy oak door at the end of the hall began to open. Every eye turned. And then, he stepped in. The oak door swung wider, slow as if savoring the reveal. The draft that followed carried with it something unseen: power, danger, reckoning. My sister-in-law's smirk vanished. My mother-in-law's hand, the same one that had just struck me, trembled in midair before she quickly lowered it to her lap. For the first time that night, she looked small. He stepped into the dining hall like a shadow wrapped in authority. Tall. Immaculately dressed. His eyes were not cruel, but they were sharp enough to slice through every lie ever told in that house. "Impossible," my mother-in-law whispered, her voice cracking. "You can't be here." Her words faltered. She was trembling. I, on the other hand, didn't move. Didn't gasp. Didn't flinch. Because I had been expecting him. "Even nightmares wake," he said calmly, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on me. And when his eyes locked with mine, I saw no malice, only a silent promise. The dining hall was no longer theirs. In an instant, the balance of power shifted. My sister-in-law stumbled back, her chair screeching across the polished floor. Why did you bring him here?" she stammered, pointing at me as if I'd just summoned a demon. I tilted my head slightly, letting them squirm. They wanted to know if I was the reason their worst fear had come to life. And I was. Because the man standing in that doorway wasn't just any man. He was the one they had betrayed, the one they had buried in whispers and secrets, the one they thought they'd destroyed forever. And tonight, he had returned. The silence was so sharp you could hear the fire crackling in the hearth. No one breathed. No one moved. Except him. He walked slowly, measured steps across the marble floor, his presence filling every corner of the room. My in-laws shrank back as though each footstep carried a curse. 25 years, my mother-in-law finally muttered, clutching her chest like she couldn't believe he was real. "We made sure you couldn't." Her voice broke. His lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. "You thought you buried me. But some things refuse to stay in the ground." My sister-in-law gasped. "But, you're supposed to be dead," he finished for her, his tone smooth, dangerous. "That's what you wanted. Isn't it?" Their eyes darted to me, panic blooming like wildfire. I remained perfectly still, letting them unravel. Because the truth was, I had known. I had known he wasn't dead. And now, the man they feared most, the one they thought they'd erased, was standing beside me. He turned his gaze to me then, softer now, as if to remind me that I was safe. My chest tightened. 4 years, I had carried their cruelty alone. 4 years, I had been their scapegoat, their punching bag, their maid-in-law. But no more. You owe her everything, he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. And tonight, you'll repay the debt you've spent decades denying. My mother-in-law shook her head violently. No, she's lying. She doesn't know who you are, she can't. But her voice was too shrill, too desperate. And her eyes betrayed her. Because deep down, she knew that the nightmare had returned not for her, but because of me. And I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He didn't rush. He never did. That was what made him terrifying. While my MIL clutched her pearls and my SIL trembled like a leaf, he leaned against the grand oak table, eyes steady, calm, lethal. Do you want me to remind you, he said slowly, what you did the night you thought you buried me? The color drained from their faces. My Mills' hand shook so badly, the diamond ring she flaunted so proudly clinked against the glass she held. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Don't you? His voice was ice. Because she knows. And then his eyes shifted to me. I felt their gaze burn holes into me, their confusion twisting into disbelief. My SIL spat out, you? What could you possibly know? I let the silence hang heavy before I spoke. My voice was calm, measured, but every word dripped with the weight of years of secrets. Because I was there that night. The room exploded in gasps. My MIL nearly collapsed into the chair. My SIL clutched her chest like she'd seen a ghost. I stepped forward, no longer the meek daughter-in-law they used to slap and spit on. My spine was straight, my eyes unblinking. I knew you tried to destroy him. I knew you lied, covered it up, and silenced anyone who dared speak. And I've carried that secret for years, waiting for the day he'd come back. Their horror deepened. You see, I continued, my voice steady, I wasn't just a witness. I was his ally. I helped him escape. The room froze. My MIL let out a strangled cry. No, 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 you wouldn't. You couldn't. But it was true. That night, 25 years ago, when they tried to kill him, I had found him, broken and bleeding. I had hidden him, nursed him, and promised him one thing. That when the time was right, we'd come back, not for revenge, but for justice. And tonight, the time had come. The chandelier hummed faintly overhead, but the silence beneath it was so suffocating, I could hear the frantic thud of my Mill's heartbeat across the room. He didn't move for a long time. He just watched them. His eyes, black pools of unreadable fury, seemed to peel away their skin until their true, rotten selves bled through. Finally, he spoke. You thought I was gone forever. But you underestimated 2 things. Her, he nodded toward me, and my memory. My SIL tried to laugh, but the sound cracked halfway. You're bluffing. If you were who you say you are, you'd already be dead. His smirk was razor sharp. You tried that once. Failed spectacularly. He reached into his coat pocket. My MIL shrieked and stumbled back, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out an envelope. Thick. Sealed with red wax. This, he said, dropping it on the table with a heavy thud, is the paper trail you thought you burned. The bank records. The forged signatures. The blood money. All of it, proof that you stole what wasn't yours. My Mill's hand flew to her mouth. My SIL turned ghost white. I leaned forward, my voice like a blade. The mansion, the accounts, the empire your family parades around. Built on lies. Built on him. He stepped closer, his voice a low growl now. I was the true heir. The rightful owner. Your husband, your father, your whole brood, they buried my name, cut me out, left me for dead. And you, his eyes locked on my Emil, you orchestrated it all. She collapsed into the chair, shaking her head violently. No, no one will believe you. No one will. Really? His voice cut like glass. Because the press will. The board will. And by tomorrow morning, the world will. This house. This fortune. This legacy. It's mine again. Then, for the first time, he turned to me fully. His voice softened, just enough to let me breathe. And she, he pointed at me, she is the only reason I lived long enough to take it back. The room exploded in chaos. My SIL screamed at my MAL, blaming her. My MIL sobbed, clawing at the air as if she could drag back the years. But it was too late. The door had opened. Their nightmare had walked in. And justice was only beginning. By dawn, the mansion wasn't ours anymore. It wasn't even a home, it was a crime scene of whispers and revelations. The media vans rolled up first. Their antennas pierced the morning sky like spears. Reporters swarmed the gates, shouting names, flashing lights, desperate to catch the story that was about to devour my in-laws alive. Inside, the nightmare played out in real time. My MAL sat at the dining table, the same table where she had once laughed as she belittled me. Only now, her mascara ran in dark rivers, her hands trembling as the manila envelope, the one she had once tried to burn, lay wide open for the cameras. Bank fraud. Property theft. Forged wills. Bloodstains on paper dressed up as legacy. My SIL, usually loud and venomous, sat mute in the corner, her mouth twisted shut. The slap she'd given me only hours ago seemed to echo in her own ears now, each sting replaced with the sound of her reputation collapsing. And then, he stepped forward. The man they thought buried. The man they thought erased. My ally. Their ghost turned executioner. He stood before the reporters, his voice steady, his presence towering. My name was stolen. My inheritance was stolen. My life was stolen. But I survived. And today, I reclaim what was always mine. The cameras exploded with flashes. Questions rained down. And every answer was another nail in my in-law's coffin. But then he did something none of us expected. He turned to me. His hand rested lightly on my shoulder, not possession, not dominance, but recognition. She, he said, his voice echoing, the woman you mocked, slapped, spat on, she is the reason I stand here today. Without her, I wouldn't have made it. Without her, none of this truth would have come to light. The crowd shifted. The reporters, the servants, even the guards, every eye moved to me. I should have felt small. I should have shrunk. But instead, I rose. And as I met my Mill's eyes, swollen with disbelief, I smiled. Because she finally saw it. Not the maid. Not the weakling. Not the outsider. But the reckoning she could never stop. The courtroom was packed. Not just with lawyers, judges, and reporters, but with ghosts. Ghosts of every insult, every slap, every cruel laugh my in-laws had thrown at me. And for once, they weren't sitting above me. They were sitting below, as defendants. My MIL clutched her pearls like a noose. My SIL sat with crossed arms, her lips twitching, fighting to keep her composure as the world watched. The judge read the charges. Fraud. Conspiracy. Abuse of power. Property theft. Each word was a dagger, and I savored every one. The evidence spoke for itself, documents I'd hidden away, testimonies from those they'd crushed, and the one witness they never thought would survive, him. The man they tried to erase, now sitting tall, unshaken, by my side. When the prosecution finished, Silence fell heavy. Then it was my turn. The court didn't expect me to speak, but I rose. My voice was steady, but my hands burned with years of rage. They thought I was nothing. They thought they could strip me of dignity, bruise me with words, break me with silence. They called me the maid, the servant, the failure. But I held on to the truth they buried, and today, that truth has buried them. Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked like gunfire. And for the first time, my MIL didn't look at me with disdain. She looked at me with fear. The judge's gavel struck. Guilty. The word rang out like freedom. My SIL cried out, my MIL fainted back in her chair, but me? I didn't flinch. I sat taller, calmer, as though my soul had been waiting for this very sound. When it was over, and their empire crumbled in front of the world, the man who had walked back from the shadows turned to me and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You saved yourself." And he was right. I walked out of that courthouse not as the maid, not as the daughter-in-law, not as the woman who was slapped and spat on. I walked out as the storm that swallowed them whole. And from that day on, whenever anyone asked about the scandal that shook the town, the papers never called it their downfall. They called it my rise. The mansion didn't look the same anymore. The cracked chandeliers had been replaced with sparkling crystal. The broken floors gleamed like mirrors. The gardens, once wilted, bloomed in wild colors that seemed to defy death itself. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was my empire's crown jewel. Reporters stood at the gates that morning as the ribbon was cut, cameras flashing wildly. Headlines the next day would read, "From maid to mogul, the woman who built an empire from the ashes of her in-laws' lies." I had become the name whispered with awe in boardrooms, the face on magazine covers, the voice that investors leaned in to hear. No one dared laugh anymore. But the sweetest part? I didn't just rise, I gave others wings. The businesses I started weren't just for profit. They were safe havens, for women abandoned, for workers cheated, for voices silenced. Every contract I signed, every hand I shook, was a promise that no one else would endure what I had endured. And my in-laws? My MIL lived out her days in quiet shame, no longer the queen of her circle but a forgotten relic. My SIL, who once spat on me, now passed me on the street with her eyes lowered, her pride shattered. They had mocked me, slapped me, spat at me. But they could never erase me. On the evening of the grand opening, as the sun sank gold over the estate, I stood on the balcony of my mansion. My hands rested on the railing, steady, strong. Behind me, the man they had tried to erase placed his arm around me. Our children laughed in the gardens below, their joy filling the air like music. 4 years, they tried to write me as a footnote in their story. But history had flipped the page. And the world now knew the truth. I was not the maid. I was the storm. I was the empire. I was the name they'd never forget.